Hey guys, I hope you are all doing well today. Today we are going to create a tip calculator from scratch using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And let me show you here. We are going to have an input and it's going to dynamically calculate the data for 10, 15, and 20%. And we're going to have some validation. So if the user tries to type in anything invalid, we'll display that invalid input. We're going to use Visual Studio Code and let's jump right into it. I have Visual Studio Code open here and I am going to create my three files. I have index.html, style.css, and index.js. Okay, so let's get started with our HTML here. So I'm going to use emit, which will generate my boilerplate HTML. So Shift 1 Enter, and let's change the title here to Tip Calculator. And I'm going to save that, and I'm going to right click and open this with live server so that we can see the web page as we code. So if you guys don't have that extension, you want to go to the extensions marketplace and just type in live server and download that right here. Okay, so now we are going to really fast link our CSS and JavaScript files so we don't have to worry about that later. And then we'll put the script tag down here, link it. Okay, so now in our HTML, first thing we're going to do is have an H2 tag, and it's just going to say tip calculator. And then we're going to have a section. This is going to be a container, and we'll just call it, we can just call it container for this project. Okay, inside the container, we are going to have the input box, and we're going to have these three percentages with the calculations below them. Okay, so first we will add the input. We're going to say type text. And let me make sure this is... Okay, and then in here, we're going to add a placeholder and just have the $sign. And that should be it. We don't need to do anything else. Oh, we are also going to add a property called max length of 10. Because we ideally don't want the user to infinitely type in as many numbers as they want. We want to limit that. So if I try to type in more than 10 numbers, it won't let me. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we're going to have another section. This will be called, let's do display container. Okay, so in here, we're going to have three divs with a class of tip percentage. Let's do display tip calculations. And then we're going to say times 3 because we're going to have 3 of them. Okay, so inside the first div, we're going to have 2 p tags. As you can see here, we need the percentage and we need the value, the dollar amount. So we'll have 2 p tags and we'll give them separate classes. So this will be tip percentage, and the second one will be tip calculation. And I'm just going to copy these 2 p tags and we're going to place them inside the other 2 divs. Okay, so let's add some, let's do text here. Well, let's do, okay, let's add some text here. So let's do 10%, 15, and I just arbitrarily pick these numbers. You can do whatever you like. 15 and 20. And then by default, we're going to have the $0.00. I'm going to copy this and paste it in these other 2 tags. Okay, so that's it for the HTML, guys. We're going to jump into the styling now. So inside our style.css, we are going to have a background in our body. So we're going to reset the margin to 0 and the padding as well. In the background color, we are going to set it to 0D47A1. Oh, forgot to put this. Alright, so now we are going to style the container. So let's add a background color here so you guys can see what we're doing. And let's just do F5, F5, F5. And let's add some padding to push everything in. And let's reduce the width quite a bit. Let's do 70%. And let's center this. So let's push it down. We can use margin to center it and also push it down. So let's do 100 pixels, auto. We can just do auto, yeah. All right, and let's also style the H2. So let's do text align center, and let's change the font color here. Let's just match the background that we gave the container, and let's reduce the font weight to 500. Okay, and we can increase the size. Let's do 32 pixels. Okay, so now in the container, I'm going to add one more thing to kind of give it a little bit of style. Let's do 5 pixels border radius, and let's give it some box shadow. And we'll just give it a black background. A box shadow, I mean. Okay, so now let's work on the input. So the input, we don't have to give it a class name for this. We can directly just say type input, type text. Since there's only one input, we don't need to give it a unique class. And let's add some padding to the input of 5 pixels. And let's remove the outline. And we'll keep everything else the same. Okay, so let's get to the fun part now and style these percentages. So we have a display container, and then we might not even use that actually. We'll probably use this display calculations. We're going to use Flexbox to show everything in a row like this and center it as well. So we can say display, let's see, what did I name it? Display calculations. And we're going to use Flexbox, display flex. Oh, sorry guys, we're not going to use display calculations. We are going to use display container. We want this on top and this on bottom. Same with the other two. We do not want to use Flexbox here. So we're going to say display container. That's how we want it. Okay. So now we're going to give some styling to the display calculations to give some margin to kind of space it out. So we can do top and bottom, we can do 10 pixels and 20, let's do 45 pixels left and right. There we go. Let's increase that font size to 20 pixels. And let's also give this, that should be fine for now. We're going to give this a bottom border like this. And let's center this. Justify content center. There we go. And I think that's all we need to do for now. So now let's add a border bottom. Let's use this class tip percentage. And we'll just say border bottom. Let's do 1 pixel solid, and we'll just do black, just to kind of give it some separation. And let's center align this text. There we go. And I'm going to actually add this to the div, parent divs, so that the other p tags are centered as well. And another thing we want to do is say that there's not enough room to display these calculations. We want to have it wrap around. So a simple way of doing that with flexbox is just saying flex wrap wrap. So if there's not enough space, it'll just wrap to the next line, which is what we want to make it responsive. And there's a little bit too much margin with this p tag above, so we're going to remove that. Or decrease it. So we'll do tip calculation. We'll do margin top. Let's do 5 pixels. Okay, let's reset that to 0. Did that help? No. That is because, let's inspect it. Okay, so we need to reset the margins real quick. So in the tip percentage, let's reset the bottom margin to 0, or we can just do like 5 pixels. I'm going to increase it. Okay, that's a little bit better. So we don't need this margin top, and I'm just going to reset the margin here to 0. Okay, and let's increase just a little bit the font size. Also, one more thing I forgot to add is we need to add this error message. So a simple way we can do that is right below the input, we can just add a p tag that will say invalid input. And if you want to be more descriptive, go ahead. We'll add a class of error, and let's just give it some styling. So we'll center align this, and then let's make the color red, and let's increase the font size just to 22 pixels. I'm going to set the margin top and bottom so we have some space here. So let's do 20 pixels top, 0 left, 10 pixels bottom, and 0 right. That looks better. I might increase this just a little bit. There we go. So that's it. And by default, we do not want to show this. So a simple attribute we can use in HTML is called the hidden attribute. There are many ways you can do this, but I really like using this attribute. We can go straight to the JavaScript. So in our JS, what we need to do first is grab this input tag. So we're going to say const input tag, and we're going to use document.querySelector. Since we didn't give the input a class name or ID, we can simply grab it by saying input type text like we did in the CSS. And this will grab the input. Let's just console.log this to make sure. There we go. And I'm going to keep the console open just so we can do some debugging if we need to. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is attach a event handler. So the event handler that we want to use here is called onInput. And right now I'm going to set this equal to a function that we will create. Let's call this handle input change. Okay, and we'll call this function directly. And in here, what we're going to get is something called this. So anytime we make a change here, we're going to get a this. Basically, it references the input tag. So if I show you guys, if I type something, we get this input tag, which is this. So we don't need to say input tag here and get the value. We can directly grab it from this. So if we want to grab the value, what we do is use this dot value. So as you can see here, now we're getting the value. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I don't want to use this dot value every time, so I'm going to just set it equal to a variable. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to add a comment here saying validate input. So the only time we're going to validate the input is if it's not empty. If it's empty, then I really don't care. We're just going to display this as 0 for each percentage. So if value is not equal to empty, and as you guys can, I want to show you guys one more thing. I'm going to comment that out real fast. I'm going to console.log the type that we get of value. It's not going to be a number. It's going to be a string, no matter what. So when we validate this, we want to be careful. So we're going to say it's not equal to an empty string, and we're going to use the isNan function, and this will tell us if it's a number or not. What it will do first is if it's a string, it will convert it to a number. So we can simply just pass in isNan. Okay, and let's say if it's the input is not valid, what we're going to do is say error. So let's say if I type in that, that's not valid. If you see I type in only numbers, it's valid. See, if I type in a space and then numbers, it's not valid. Okay, so let's actually show the error input that we error log message that we have here with the p tag. So I'm going to create a function here, and what we're going to do here is just toggle the hidden attribute. So I'm going to call this function toggle, and that basically just means remove it and add it as we need it. So toggle error message, and I'm going to pass in a parameter here saying show error message, show error, which is just going to be a boolean of true or false. So if the input is not valid, we're going to call this function and say toggle error message, and we're going to say true. So here we're going to say document.get query selector, and we're going to say .error, and then we're going to say hidden. .hidden is an attribute that we get from that, and we can simply just say the inverse show error. So basically, if the show error is true, we want to remove hidden. So if hidden is set to false, it will show it, and if it's set to true, it will hide it. So let's test it real fast. So if we have an error state, then it will show it, and if it's not in an error state, it will hide it. But the thing is, we need to call this function again and say false. So here we'll just have an else statement, say toggle error message false. Okay, so let's try that again, and then if I do that, it will be valid. Cool, and we can also use decimals here. All right, so we got the error handling for the most part done. And if you guys wanted to, we could also check for the length of the string here. But since we have it here, I'm not going to check it again. But in real world practice, you would want to check it again. Anyways, let's go on to the next thing. So now let's actually calculate these percentages based on the input. So the first thing we want to do is have an input array, not an input array, a tip array that will contain all of the percentages. So it's just going to be a constant up here, and we can also have it in the function, but I'm just going to have it up here globally, and we're going to say 10, 0.10, 0.15, and 0.20. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to loop through these p tags. So we want to grab all the p tags, all three of them, and then we want to loop through them and then calculate the tip percentage, the tip value for each percentage. So the way we are going to do this, first I'm going to create a function here saying calculate tip. Okay, and what we're going to pass in here are two things, tip percentage and the value that we get from the input. Let's say input value to be more precise. Okay, and all we're going to do here, okay, before I do this function, the math part will be easier. Let's actually get to the loop. So I'm going to say here, we can make this a constant. Let's do display tips. You know, for tutorial purpose, I want to just make this easy as possible. So my naming convention is just going to be geared towards an easier way to understand what we're grabbing. So it's going to be the p tags. Let's name this p tags, and we're going to say document.query selector, and we want to use query selector all here, because if we don't use all, it'll only grab the first p tag. So let's see, what did we name this? We named it tip calculation. So if we do dot tip calculation, and then we're going to just end that there. And now we're going to say ptags.forEach. We're going to use a for each loop, and then that has a callback function inside of it. Okay, inside the callback function. So we're going to have two parameters here that will be passed. So we'll have the p tag, the singular p tag, and then we'll have an index. So the index is used for getting the index number for each value of the array, which will be useful for us when we're sending this tip array to our calculate tip function. So here we're going to say ptag.innerHTML. We're going to set the text here, and we're going to call this function calculate tip. And what we're going to pass in here is the tip percentage. So we can say tip array. We're going to use that index, and then we're going to pass in the p tag. Sorry, we're going to pass in the input value, which is just value here. And that's it. So now in the calculate tip, what we're going to do here is just simply have a return statement. And in here, we're going to concatenate the $sign with the math here. So we're going to say tip percentage times value, input value. And if this is a decimal, I want to show it as a decimal, and I only want to show it to two places. So we're going to use two fixed, two points after the decimal. That's all we're going to show. So let's say we have $1 here. So now you can see it's calculating it for each and every tip percentage. Let's go to the extreme and see it stops us at 10. Let's try to type in any letters. So we're going to get a NaN operator. We do not want to do that. So what we want to do is, if the error message is true, we just want to return this from this function so that nothing gets displayed. So as you guys can see now, this is working just fine. And this is also mobile responsive. I probably forgot to mention that in the beginning. One thing that I want to show you guys is when we get to desktop size, or bigger screen, it's just too big, this container. So what we can do here is just add in a quick little media query. And this is just to show the beginners here how we can make this completely mobile responsive. So we can say min width. So we're going to say a media query is basically adjusting for any styles that when the screen gets bigger, we can adjust them however we want. So let's say when we get to 950 pixels of screen size or bigger, all we want to do here, and this also I wanted to mention that this screen is used for our normal everyday screens like phones, tablets, laptops, desktops, monitors, you name it. So here we have our container. So this container, we want to set this width to be way smaller. So the width here will be, let's say 50%. Okay. So I'm going to make this bigger, and that looks a bit better. We could play around with it more, but I think this is fine. Okay, guys. Let's see. Yep, everything's good. So that's all I wanted to show you guys. This was a quick and hopefully easy to understand tutorial. I really wanted to make this for beginners who are just starting out for programming. But if you guys enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing. I really appreciate all the love that you guys show. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.